Good morning, afternoon, and evening. My name is Spirit, and welcome to Spirit at Sundown. Still working on the intro for this show. I wanted to do something that's, in general, a bit looser and just kind of talk. So I haven't even found the title that I want yet, but in general, we're just working with it and hoping for what's best. So I do want to say a big thank you to my quote-unquote sponsors for this episode, which are my lovely patrons, such as Maxagear, Mr. Eden, and Rocky Harmony for their generous donations to the show. If you would like to join them up on screen, the link to my Patreon is in the description below, where you can get perks such as discounts and early access to commissions. Their support helps me do things like pay for new equipment, cover for material costs. Oh boy, we're only a couple minutes in and I'm already messing this up. They help me cover for new equipment, material costs, and help me pay for my degree to become an animator. So if you have $1 or $2 you'd like to chip in, you'll have my endless gratitude. I honestly don't know how to make that sound more genuine, I'm sorry. Anywho, so a friend of mine recently came to me and he said he's having a lot of struggles finding inspiration for working on YouTube videos. And I honestly, I really don't blame him. Like, if you look at YouTube as a platform nowadays and you compare it back to the day, for me, the glory days of YouTube were back in 2011 to 2014, because that was back in the day when YouTube was really starting to get big and people could really actually do this for a living. And then the next thing you know, we've got stuff like the adpocalypse and just I kind of wish I had more to say on this. I wrote down a few notes for this whole show, but I wanted to really just go off of improvisation and nothing else. But honestly, I don't blame him, especially looking at my numbers right now. I barely ever get 1,000 views on my videos nowadays, which really sucks because a 10-minute video is generally about 2 weeks worth of production time. So I'll sit down and I'll spend 2 to 3 hours minimum on a script. It's usually about 4 to 5 considering me. I'll spend at least 1 to 2 hours recording and editing out my little derp ups, which you saw earlier today. And I think on average, my average editing time for a normal episode of Art Block is usually about 6 hours minimum, depending on how agreeable Premiere decides to be that day. And so add all that up with just impending burnout and general poor ratings, for lack of a better word, it's definitely, not to sound like, oh, woe is me, I put myself through this on purpose. But, to be honest, I don't understand why a lot of us YouTubers put ourselves through this nowadays. What is the point if the algorithm isn't going to push us out? Anyway, I'm getting off topic. This is supposed to be inspiration, not Spirit mopes about YouTube for 2 hours, because God knows I do that enough on Discord. But yeah, so a friend of mine mentioned that he doesn't feel particularly inspired to make YouTube videos. And honestly, I don't blame him. Just the effort alone of coming up with a video idea that you know is going to do well on YouTube and then executing on it. Just that whole process of getting from point A to point B is really tricky, especially editing. And you see, all these highly edited videos, my friend Tyan Daga, he does these really highly edited videos with all these effects and transitions and all this stuff. And I haven't seen, his files or anything, but I have seen the effort he puts into them. And I'm just whoa. Dude, I'm bruh, how do you even put up with this? And at the same time, just the idea of having to go through that creative process, creativity is both really fun, but it's also a bit of a drag if you think about it, because you're sitting there for hours by yourself working on something, and then you post it and you watch other people slowly rack up the numbers. So, but anyway, getting back on topic, let's talk about inspiration. So, what inspires you to become inspired Oh boy, that's great English. What causes you to become inspired, and what is inspiration? So, to me, inspiration basically comes down to two things. I think of it as primary inspiration and secondary inspiration. So, primary inspiration for me is that first real, like, that first spark of starting something new. Like, you think of this new idea and you really want to run with it. Like, it's still in kind of its infancy, but you get this great idea and then you just run with it. Like, I tend to get a lot of these things at about 3 a.m, and I don't remember them. So I have to write it down to remember it. So I have little notes on my phone. And a lot of them are like Chibi Hell episode ideas. I say episodes in air quotes. But one of them just says leeks. I don't know why, but apparently, like, it has to do with the actual vegetable. Like, it didn't have to do anything with plumbing or anything like that, but just leeks the vegetable. I don't know why it comes up to this, but then we have, like, secondary inspiration, which is kind of... Secondary inspiration is more like helping you get into the groove of working on a long-running project. Like, especially if you're writing a book, like, a lot of people will listen to music of a specific type when they're writing to help them really get into the mood. And that's kind of what secondary inspiration is for me, is finding something that really gets you into the flow, so to speak. I do want to talk about, I kind of want to break this one up into two parts. So I'm going to talk about some of the things that inspire me personally when it comes to, like, not necessarily specifically primary or secondary, but just things that get me inspired in general. And then I actually sent out a poll, air quotes, in my Discord server asking people what they think what they know inspires them. And I'm going to just kind of read off of those. So I was initially hoping to do this series more as like a live call sort of scenario, but just considering this is the first pilot episode, like first official pilot episode, I'm just going to run this one by myself and then read off of the Discord responses. So we'll go ahead. I'm going to just talk about some of the things that inspire me, and I usually think of it in the context of my projects, because I've been working on a few projects for the past, nearly 5 years. My oldest one is nearly 5 years old. I think 2014? Yeah, 2014, 5 years old. And it's kind of hard to stick with something for that long, but when you have sources of inspiration, and here's the thing, when you're working on projects that are long-lasting, your sources of inspiration will change. Like, you can't constantly draw from the same thing. But I've always found that when I'm feeling stuck or trying to find inspiration for working on a large project, going back to things that I've saved or finding inspiration from previous things that I may not have touched in a while is really good for just generally getting those creative juices flowing. So I guess, for example, I'll use my project, The Runaways, because that's the one that's closest to completion, at least comparatively. The original inspiration was kind of a mashup of Hunger Games, Gregor the Overlander, and there was one more. What was that? There was one other project that had to do with underground. But anyhow, so it's basically taking a very dystopian theme combined with an underground setting. So what if we put a post-apocalyptic dystopian setting in an underground world and then sprinkle in some 1984 with that? So the whole thing about, like, getting inspired for a big project is you just need an idea. It doesn't have to seem like a good one at first, and it will change over time. But just starting with that idea will be really it's the key to getting yourself going, if that makes sense. So, for example, I think there's actually an older version of it, but when you start off with the idea, you just have to start with a premise. It doesn't have to be like fully fleshed out. You just have to take an idea. If this, then that. So what if we had humans with fire powers in the 30th century? See, it sounds weird on paper, but the more you dive into it, the more it'll start to make sense the more you flesh it out. And I'm not saying that every idea is going to work. Like, especially especially if you're improving, the nature of projects often is you'll get an idea, and you'll be really passionate about it, and you'll dive right into it, and you'll get really inspired, and you'll work on it, and then you'll have to either put it down for a little bit, you'll have to shelve it, you'll have to do something with it that makes you stop working on it, or something else. And then you'll come back to it and you'll realize this was a really fun project to work on, but at the same time, I don't have the time or means to work on this anymore, and it may not be worth it to work on it anymore, if that makes sense. Like, sometimes it's best to take what you've learned from a project and then run with it, instead of taking, like, constantly recycling it and redoing it. And I have a bad habit of doing that as well, is that I've gotten stuck in a feedback loop of having to constantly redo my old projects, or taking things from older projects and incorporating them into new projects, which it's not bad if you really stick with it and you want to improve it. But at the same time, you have to consider, is it time to let go of this idea? So getting a little off topic there, but I guess it kind of ties into inspiration, if that makes sense, because especially if you're busy, like if you're a college student, if you're a high school student, if you work, like you're not going to have time to constantly work on 4 projects at a time. So you sometimes have to, and it sucks, but you have to sometimes let certain things go and allow yourself room for new ideas. Like, take what you've learned and use it to make something better. And that's kind of the thing, is that, especially like when it comes to stuff like writing, you will improve. Like, don't let your fears of something prevent you from starting. So it's better to start now and leave yourself willing, like, allow yourself to be able to fail. Because if you fail at one thing, that means that once you get inspired for the next thing, you'll be able to do the next thing a little bit better. So a couple things that I find usually inspires me is, like, at least for primary inspiration, coming up with ideas, is watching either movies, animated films, or playing games. So I found a lot of my inspiration tends to come from video games, and it's not always like directly. Like, I'll usually, like, some days I'll be sitting down and I'll be playing Spyro, and I'll be like, I really want to work on a dragon-based project. And then just, there it is. You have the inspiration, like, you don't know where it's going to go, but you have that point A. Now you just have to figure out where point B is going to be. So another thing is that, especially if you're a YouTuber, finding YouTubers that you find really inspiring is going to be a really great way to go. Like, find a YouTuber that you feel has just the right mojo, that you click, and that they have the same general vibe as you. Like, one YouTuber that I've been watching a lot lately is Base Shaman, and he's just got this really great, like, chill vibe, and he's really calm about everything, and he's really positive about it. Like, always remember to stay positive when you're working on your stuff. Like, don't ever let it get you down. Don't let it get you down. But honestly, like, if you're trying to work on YouTube videos, first off, Godspeed, but second of all, just find a format that you're having fun with. Like, I've personally gotten burnt out on art block and stuff like that, but that's another story for another video, maybe, hopefully. But yeah, in terms of finding inspiration for making, like, videos and stuff, find YouTubers that inspire you. And sometimes your current, like, line of work is just not going to work. And it sucks. Like, I've thought about having to cancel art block after season 2 because it's just not working out in the algorithm. It takes too long to produce. But in general, just find something that you click with, and don't be afraid to change if something's not working out. That's the main thing I really want to push here, is that inspiration, while you can have a bunch of great ideas, sometimes you have to let go of other ideas in order to be inspired. So, trying to think of other things. Music is another thing that I find is really inspiring. Music, I usually am a little bit more like secondary inspiration. So I'll be listening to different types of music when I want to work on different things. So I won't have started the project for the day, but I'll usually have like a set goal in mind. Like I'll wake up and I'll say, oh, I want to work on YouTube videos. So I'll go and I'll find like maybe a lo-fi stream or something like that, because I found that lo-fi is really good. Just kind of runs in the background, provides a bit of background noise, and you don't really have to worry about it. Like sometimes there's little like foley and jingles and whatever that's not specifically music, but I've generally found that the longer I work, the more I can tune out. So, and for another example, if you're working on a fantasy project, find, like if something inspires you, a specific soundtrack or something like that. Like I've found that the Halo soundtrack really inspires me to get into working on different things, like especially Halo 3, because that was actually, Halo 2 and Halo 3 was my main inspiration for Spectral Wings, which that one's, oh boy, that project. But find things, like once you find something you can really latch onto, don't stick with it forever because you'll get tired of it. But if you have something that really gets you in the mood or gets you pumped, play it in the morning. Like if you have a project that needs to be done that day, play your workout music or play your hype music. Do it. You'd be surprised how like helpful it can be. So I think for this next half of the next half of this podcast, I'm going to read off some of the entries that people have sent in and just see what people have said. So let's go ahead and see. Prince Leader says, whenever I need inspiration, I usually sit down and turn on some music, sing a little bit, and just see what comes to me. Whenever I did my 3D trees, I wanted to do something unique and pretty and test my skills. So I just Googled pictures of leaves and looked outside and decided on oak and a dogwood. Other times, I'll just get an idea out of the blue and see if I want to have it done. So I do it. That's another thing, is that sometimes you just get an idea out of the blue. So, for example, my little Chibi Hell series, I just had the idea, I want a grumpy little person to make funny memes out of. So I started off making out a little, I think it was like a "this is fine" face. Just a little like thumbs up, yep, this is fine, totally fine. Like that kind of moment of, oh, I'm way in over my head. And over time, people really started to latch onto her. So I was like, well, I'm having fun with her and everyone else is enjoying this, so let's just keep doing it. And it's kind of become its own little thing. Like my friends and I especially, like it's not super big on Twitter or anything at the moment, but my friends and I have a lot of fun just memeing about it. But that's another thing, is that like when you see an idea out of the blue, like if you're not in an opportune situation, maybe write it down and then come back to it. But if you have an idea out of the blue, run with it. Like sometimes lightning strikes in those situations. Don't be afraid to take it and go. Parkour ET says, when I need inspiration, I'll usually watch movies or TV shows. I'll take my own spin on a ship design or a character or the setting. But this is also with other people's art. Looking at really high quality art is very inspiring to me. Okay, had a little moment there, couldn't read. But yeah, that's another thing actually, is that especially if you're a creative mind, looking at art can be a really good way of getting you some ideas, like getting those creative juices flowing. So I have a few artists that I follow on DeviantArt, such as, I think her name is pronounced Lapodity, however you pronounce it. But her Earth Song 9405, and there's one other one, I think it's Citra360, however you pronounce his name. But just looking at different art and seeing like different techniques and different styles, and it can be really good for just getting your creative mind going. And that's actually another thing, just a side tangent, but I found that podcasts, like listening to different podcasts, can really help me, like even if it's not related to what I'm working on that day. I found that listening to, like I listen to the Animute podcast by Crown Prince, and it's really good, like it's not necessarily background noise, but good for getting my mind thinking. So if I'm like getting ready for the day, I'll turn on a podcast that's related to what I want to do, or even unrelated, and it'll just get the gears in my head turning. And so once you even just get your brain thinking for the day, you can really start getting going with what you want to do. So let's see, Twist of Fate says, I like to look at things I'm passionate about and usually stuff I know others are too. Use pictures and art from my friends and peers to help me, but give my own flair. It's original to me. Music usually helps me relax and focus more on art projects, and even at times I'll listen to a certain genre or playlist that gets me in the mood. Like when I was working on my Haunted Mansion piece, I was listening to the soundtrack for the ride as well as other horror/spooky songs to get into the eerie zone I worked on. Yeah, that's actually another thing too, is that if you are working on a specific piece like fan art, always, like, I found that listening to the soundtrack or related music to whatever I'm making fan art of not only helps me focus, but it helps me stay in the game, and I found that it actually helps me produce a better product because I've kind of immersed myself into the world and the characters. So that's another thing too, is that I actually listen, like, when I need help drawing general fantasy stuff, I'll actually listen into, oh boy, that's great English. I'm off to a great start today. But I'll listen to the Spyro soundtrack to help me really get in the mood. Like, Spyro's got a really nice upbeat kind of, it has electric guitars in it, but it's also got a very upbeat and kind of colorful soundtrack, for lack of a better word. Like, it's very bright. So find things that are related to what you're working on, and that'll generally help you get going. So let's see what else. Kenisu of Dragons. I find that I let my mind wander while I'm going through the motions at work. When I'm not being pressured to think of ideas, especially having those thoughts are what help me get through my job faster. No, help me get through my job easier. I need to make the size of my Discord window bigger so I can read this better. But yeah, that's actually another thing too, is that inspiration is very deeply tied to burnout. So if you work, like, I personally currently work as art as my job. So if I stop working on art for a day or a weekend, I found that if I let myself recharge and I do something else, it really helps me get back into the creative flow. So our brains don't have the capacity to work on something 24/7. Like, we are not machines that can just constantly make stuff. You gotta let yourself rest when you're feeling tired. So you gotta just get out of the house. Like, if maybe get a part-time job. I've been thinking about getting a part-time job at one of the local retail places just to help me get something to use my brain in a different fashion, because there's a lot of thinking that goes into art. So if you allow your brain a time to just recharge, then you'll really start coming up with those great ideas. So yeah, maybe, especially if you're working as an artist, like full-time artists, I can kind of understand because there's a lot of time that goes into it. Like, I'm technically part-time artist, part-time something, part-time student probably, hopefully. But like, that's the thing, is that if you can, like, it's exhausting, don't get me wrong, but if you can, maybe consider getting a part-time job that's relatively easy. Like, I don't recommend retail or fast food, but maybe, like, I had someone who I follow on Twitter called, I think she goes by Holly, they go by The Bare Minimum, and they have a really great comic, and they recently got a job as a florist, and I'm thinking, that's really good, because while, like, it's not explicitly a creative job, but at the same time, it allows your brain to go into a different space, and then when you come back home, you'll not only be a lot more inspired to work and have more mental capacity to do it, for lack of a better word, but you're also earning more money on the side. So especially for artists, if you are a full-time artist, I would highly encourage you to maybe look into getting a job on the side if you can, because that will allow you an opportunity to let your brain rest, which will help you become more creative, and it will also allow you to earn more money on the side. Go ahead and take one more from the discussion channel. My voice is getting a little hoarse, I don't know if you can hear it. But Black Witchy Cat says, to find inspiration, I do different things. I'll listen to musicals, especially sad or inspiring songs. Or it will strike me when listening to someone talk about certain topics. In school, I didn't feel like doing anything, and we had a sub. He started talking about something. I don't remember what he said, but I felt inspired. I want to say it was about trying and succeeding. Lord knows I can read today. Or looking at other amazing artists, and I just feel like drawing or improving. Okay, so that's actually another thing, is that if you're feeling particularly uninspired, maybe look into inspirational, just general motivational videos. Because I've found that sometimes I will have zero motivation to work. And it's really affecting my brain because I can't seem to get any ideas to work properly. So if you're feeling down, if you're feeling demotivated, find inspiration. Lord knows that sounds really cheesy, I'm sorry. But yeah, I have a link to a inspirational, like a motivational video that I'll leave in the description for you guys, just so that, because it's the one that I personally use when I'm not feeling very motivated. But get motivated. Like, pump yourself up. This is exciting. We're here for life. You're here to live and experience stuff. So get yourself excited to work. Like, I know it's work, it's a drudge, but you'll feel so rewarded when it's done at times. Like, especially, I'm drawing the 50th furry for the day. Oh no, what am I gonna do? Well, here's the thing. It's gonna suck for the time being, but at the same time, once it's done, it's gonna be so rewarding because the client is gonna be happy. And I'm gonna be happy because the client's happy. So just went off on a completely different tangent there, but yeah, so get yourself motivated. Find motivational videos on YouTube or elsewhere. You'd be surprised like how good it can be for just being inspired. So if you can't find inspiration or motivation, then seek it out. So I think this is probably going to be the end of this particular episode. So if you guys did like this and want to see more, do let me know in the comments below. I do ask if you wouldn't mind to share this video around on other platforms like Twitter, Facebook. Share it around on different platforms like Twitter, Facebook, Discord, etc. Every little bit helps, and who knows, maybe I can make my way up to making this a weekly show. Lastly, if you are interested in seeing more art-related content, please do check out my Art Block series. It's the show where I talk about art and how it's made. That show is a lot more highly edited and tends to be a lot more tutorial and discussion-based. Also, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of new videos, as well as follow me on Twitter, DeviantArt, and Patreon. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. Another shout out to my patrons who you've seen on screen. I'm Spirit, and I don't know how to do outros.